Good morning, ladies as well as gentlemen. Papa Boris is here for some more Hearthstone newbie-friendly gameplay, and we're actually going to use this video to introduce the interface in Hearthstone for making decks. So let's say you want to make a deck. What you do on this main page here is you click on the My Collection button. And once that opens up, you're going to go ahead and click this New Deck button over here. So the first thing that you have to do is pick a class. Now, in this video, we're going to make a deck with the Warlock, Gul'dan. So Gul'dan is a very interesting, the Warlock is a very interesting class in Hearthstone. The hero ability is quite novel. So Life Tap damages you for 2 and then draws you a card. So this is the only hero ability that actually has a negative impact on you. All the other abilities are purely positive, so that kind of goes to show that it's a very strong ability. Drawing a card for 2 mana and having that at will every turn is quite good. The Warlock class is one that I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with. I really want to like it because I think this hero ability is really cool. However, Warlocks are tough. They're tough to make decks with, and they're tough to play correctly because they have a lot of self-damage and aggression, and I'm not super great at that. So what I actually did is I looked up a deck online, I did some research, and found a deck by a gentleman or lady named Curi called the Board Control deck. And so that's the deck that we're going to be building here. It's a deck that has actually performed really well in tournaments, so we're seeing a top caliber deck here. Not necessarily top caliber play, but a top caliber deck. And what's cool about it is it's quite expensive. It has 3 legendaries in it, but luckily, despite only having 6 of 34 legendaries myself, I have 2 of the legendaries in this deck, so we'll be able to make almost a complete version of it. Now, the idea behind this deck is that we want to play a lot of cheap creatures, but we're not going to just do the typical aggro thing, which is go for the opponent's face. We're going to try to buff our creatures and then trade our cheap creatures for our opponent's more expensive creatures. So our quote-unquote older creatures will get to trade off versus the opponent's newer creatures, and then once we've got the board control, then we're going to start swinging damage and then using the hero ability whenever possible in order to draw cards and keep our card advantage up. So how are we going to do this? Well, the Warlock class has more 1-mana creatures than any other class, and in fact, we're going to put all of them in the deck. Remember that there are class-specific cards, and then there are neutral cards. And the class-specific cards for Warlock feature a lot of 1-mana creatures. So there's the Blood Imp. It's stealth, which means it cannot be targeted or attacked, and it gives your other minions +1 health. So notice that we were establishing kind of the buffing theme here of making our minions able to scale up and trade against better creatures. We're going to play the Flame Imp. This is one of the Warlock's, as we like to call them, YOLO cards, because it damages you. You deal 2 damage to your hero when it comes into play. Now, the Flame Imp is only 1 mana for a 3/2, so it's pretty good. It's a small price to pay for a pretty nice increase in power. We're going to play the Voidwalker. This is just a 1/3 with Taunt. Remember, Taunt means that enemy creatures must attack the Voidwalker if they can. Only after this thing has been killed can they attack your other creatures or you. And we're also going to talk a little bit in this video about how to build decks when you're in this menu here. So right now I'm on the All Crystal down here. So that means I'm seeing all the cards. Now what I could do is if I say, I want some more 1-drops, is I can click the 1 button. And now I only see the 1-drops. So we're going to want one more creature in this deck that's super cheap, and that's going to be the Argent Squire. So we have a lot of turn 1 plays. Again, that's not necessarily to go balls to the walls aggro. It's so that these creatures can get buffed later and trade up to our opponent's bigger creatures. So the Argent Squire's Divine Shield, what that means is that the first time she takes damage, her health doesn't drop, instead the Divine Shield goes away. So it's a sturdy creature, and it works very well with buffing. Now there are other 1-mana creatures we can take, but let's click the 2 button. And add some 2-mana creatures to this deck. So we're going to add in some creatures that we don't really care if they end up getting traded off. So for that, we're going to have the Blood Mage Thalnos. This is a legendary. Spell damage +1 means that your spells that deal damage do an extra damage when you cast them, as long as he's on the board. And Death Rattle is an effect that triggers when he dies. That means you draw a card. So when this Blood Mage lives, your spells are more powerful, and then when your opponent kills off his fragile body, you don't really care too much because you draw a card and he replaces himself. We're also going to throw in, let's keep on going here. We're also going to throw in a Novice Engineer. So the Novice Engineer has a battle cry of draw a card, so we don't really care if she gets buffed up and then trades to an enemy creature and then dies, because she drew a card when she came into life, and so it's fine that she's going to die for the cause later on. So there's actually one more creature that we're going to throw in here at the 2-mana level, and that is the Knife Juggler. So this is a 3/2 for 2 mana, which is totally on par with what a 2 mana creature should be. And then after you summon a minion, he deals 1 damage to a random enemy. So you're getting a lot of knife juggles in this deck because a lot of your creatures are so cheap, so we're going to be summoning lots and lots of minions. Okay, so we've got some pretty good minions here. Let's go, our cheap stuff. Let's go ahead and see what we're going to be buffing this up with. One is a very, very strong card, one of my favorite cards in the game. This is the Shattered Sun Cleric. So the Shattered Sun Cleric here gives a friendly minion +1/+1, so it helps the minion both do extra damage and kill something, and it also potentially helps it survive against a weaker creature. We're also going to throw in a couple of Dark Iron Dwarfs. This has a battle cry of give a minion +2 attack, so no health bonus from this guy, but he helps a small minion reach up even higher to trade against a powerful creature. And we're going to put in 1 copy of the Defender of Argus. I actually only have 1 copy of this card, but there's only 1 that's used in the deck, so hooray. This is a really good card. It's a 3/3 for 4 mana, and it gives both of the adjacent minions, so positioning on the field matters, +1/+1 like a Shattered Sun Cleric does, but it also gives them taunt for some protection. In this deck, the taunt isn't quite as important as the fact that 2 different minions are getting +1/+1 each. However, since his stats are pretty bad for the mana cost, 3/3 for 4 mana is not super great. We don't really want 2 of these guys in the deck because there's a chance that they'll both be in the hand and there'll be nothing on the board that needs to be buffed. Alright, so we put in several creatures here. Now let's go ahead and add some removal to the deck. Obviously, if we're going to want to maintain board control, we're going to need some removal. So we're going to start in, we're going to go back to the all crystal here so we can see everything. We're going to play Demon Fire. This is a Warlock spell. One thing you may remember is that spells are all class specific. All of the neutral creatures, or excuse me, all of the neutral cards in this deck or in this game are creatures. So if you ever want any kind of a spell, it must come from your class specific pool. So Demon Fire is 2 mana for 2 damage to a minion, but what's cool is if it's a friendly demon, you can give it +2/+2 instead. So you can either buff one of your own demons or deal damage to an opponent's creature. We have quite a few demons here. The Blood Imp, the Flame Imp, and the Void Walker, all of these are demons. And that's it for now, but what's important is that all of our 1-drops here, except for the Argent Squire, are demons, which enables us to do a lot of buffing if we play one of these early on and then play Demon Fire afterwards. We're going to also include a spell called, actually let me go backwards here, there we go. We're going to include a spell called Mortal Coil. So this is a 1 mana spell that deals 1 damage to a minion. The cool thing is, though, that if the minion dies, then you draw a card. Now, because this is a bit of a specific card, it's possible that it won't have good targets. We're actually just going to put 1 of these in the deck. So I can click a card over here to take it out of the deck. I can click on it in my library to add it to the deck. What we are going to play with 2 copies of is Soulfire. This is a really crazy good card. It's 0 mana for 4 damage. It can also target the opponent directly. Now, the price you have to pay is you discard a random card. Now, if you're used to Magic, you would expect that if you don't have any cards in your hand, then the spell would be unplayable. Actually, that's not how it works in Hearthstone. If you do happen to be holding this and your hand is empty, then you just get 4 damage for totally free, and that is pretty sweet. We're going to play with 1 copy of a card called Power Overwhelming. This gives a minion +4/+4 until the end of the turn, which is a huge buff, but then the minion dies. So this is a card we just want to have only 1 of in the deck because there's a chance, again, that we're not going to be in the right position to use it, so we don't want to go too all in on that particular card. Okay, we're also going to include a card called Shadow Flame. This one happens to be golden. Golden is like in Magic, a foil card. It's just, prettier. It's got some, unique animation and so forth. So it doesn't actually have any mechanical effect that this guy's fingers are wiggling. But it just happens to be that way. I just happened to get one, and that's why it's a golden frame. So the card itself is 4 mana, destroy a dead friendly minion, and deal its attack damage to all enemy minions. So again, we don't want to have 2 of these in the deck. This will just be a onesie here, because it's possible that we won't have any good targets to use it on. But it's actually a really cool combo with Power Overwhelming. So if you Power Overwhelming something that's going to die anyway at the end of the turn, then you can play Shadow Flame on that minion and totally wipe your opponent's board. It's pretty strong. If you can pull it off, it's good stuff. Now, there are other cards that we could play from the Warlock side of things. Let's go ahead, though, and round out our deck with some neutral cards. So what else do we want? Well, we're going to take in 1 copy of the Azure Drake. This is a very good card. We've talked about it before. It's a 4/4 for 5 mana. It ups your spell damage, and it also draws you a card. So it's keeping on going with the card draw theme. We're also going to throw in another legendary here. This was, again, one that I'm fortunate to have. This is Sylvanas Windrunner. We played it before with our Shaman deck. So in this deck, it's actually much better than it was in the deck that I made. It's a 5/5 for 5, and the Death Rattle is take control of a random enemy minion. Now, what's cool about this deck is it actually has ways of killing off your own creatures. Power Overwhelming will kill off your own creature. So will the Shadow Flame that we have here. So since we have a pretty easy time killing off our own creatures, not pretty easy, but easier than most decks, we actually have ways to kill Sylvanas off herself, which reduces the potential for the opponent to play around this card effectively. And there's another legendary that should go into the deck. Unfortunately, I don't have it, so we're going to replace that legendary with a Stormwind Champion. So this is a 7-mana card. We've used it a long time ago with our Paladin deck. It's a 6/6 for 7, and your other minions all have +1/+1. Okay, now in true-to-life fashion, I have forgotten what the last card is that's supposed to go into supposed to go into this deck. So give me just a moment to look this up. Oh my god. I can never remember all of the cards. Yes, that's right. The last card that we're going to include here is the Argent Commander. This is a really, really good rare. Highly recommended that you craft one of these if you don't get it, because you're going to use it in a lot of different decks. It's a really good card. 6 mana charge, meaning it can attack the turn it comes into play, and it's got one of those Divine Shields. So you play it, you either hit your opponent, and then he's safe behind his Divine Shield, or you run into an enemy creature, kill it off, the Divine Shield pops, and you're left with a 4/3 on the board. Okay, so that is it for the deck. My apologies as always for forgetting to what the heck the last 2 cards are. Let's go ahead and call this Curi's Board Control. I do want to give credit to the gentleman or lady who invented the deck, and in this video we're just going to go ahead and play 1 game with the deck to try it out, and then there will be another video coming up soon where we play some more games with the deck so that you can see it in action across a few games. Here the focus, of course, was just on constructing the deck. Alright, we're up against a Rogue. Cavalcanti. Should be good, I think. Rogue's hero ability is the Dagger. She can attack creatures with her hero ability. However, not a lot of our stuff is going to die too easily to that Dagger. In fact, this is a great opening hand. We'll just keep this on board. So we'll play the Voidwalker on turn 1 here. And then on turn 2, depending on what my opponent does, we'll either play Novice Engineer and draw a card, or we'll just Demon Fire this thing, make it a 3/5, which is quite mighty on turn 2, and then we'll attack the opponent with that. So yeah, I think we'll go for this. It is putting a lot of eggs in one basket, but Rogues, while they have very good removal options, there's no single card that will allow them to kill this early in the game. There's a combination of cards. A Backstab plus an Eviscerate will kill that thing. So that's 2 specific cards. She's going to sap it. Well, that's a pretty cool spell here. Return an enemy minion to its owner's hand, so that obviously is very, very sad. I now wish, of course, I'd played the Novice Engineer. So basically, I sort of wasted the Demon Fire. But that's alright. We're just going to go ahead and play everything out. So we're back onto the board, and we're now ready to play a Shattered Sun Cleric, buff one of these creatures, and potentially trade with what my opponent plays down. We'll see what she wants to do for 3 mana. That sap was incredibly good for her. Man, what a good card. This is a Kobold Geomancer. It gives +1 spell damage, so we're going to want that to be taken off the board immediately. Don't want rogues getting extra spell damage here. I'm going to go ahead and buff the Novice Engineer. It's a bit risky keeping it at 1 health because the Rogue Dagger here will be able to kill this off, but I have a taunt in the way at the moment. So since the taunt is here in the way, it's going to be a little bit tricky for my opponent to get at this Novice Engineer with her dagger, at least for the time being. She's going to use the coin to get an extra mana, and for 5 mana, what will she play? Eviscerate. So she's going to get to kill off my little Voidwalker there, and she's going to play the SI Agent. It got comboed out, so combo means that if you play a card before it, then an effect happens, and in this case, the effect was dealing 2 damage, so she managed to kill everything off pretty good. Well, that is fine by me. So what we're going to do here is we're going to play a Knife Juggler, And we're going to play a Shattered Sun Cleric onto the existing Shattered Sun Cleric. Fling a knife at my opponent's face, which is good, because that creature was going to die anyway. So notice what we're trying to do here. We're just keeping the board advantage going. We're trying to always kill off the opponent's stuff. Rogues are also quite good at killing off opponent's stuff, so the fact that we're giving the rogue a run for her money here shows that this deck is pretty solid. Alright, let's see what she's got for 3 mana. It's a Shiv. So she gets to deal 2 damage. Notice how the 2 is an asterisk, so that means it's getting buffed by the Geomancer. So that is why that looked that way. Alright, so here I could play the Argent Commander, but I think it's time to start drawing some cards. So what I'll do is life tap here, take 2 life, draw a card. Shadow Flame, not exactly what I needed, but I do have the combo with Sylvanas now. We'll play the Blood Imp to boost our creature's health. This makes the Shattered Sun Cleric here survive the dagger. And we're going to Demon Fire this Kobold Geomancer, because we do not want that sticking around to buff our opponent's stuff. Now, in Constructed, you're only allowed to have 2 copies of any given card in the deck. Notice that was the second Kobold Geomancer that we've killed, so we'll know that there are no more Kobold Geomancers coming down from our opponent. She really is into this whole spell damage thing. This seems to be a spell damage rogue deck. And she doesn't have any spells, though, for 1 mana, which is just fine by us. Here is where we get to see the power of the Argent Commander. This is kind of amazing. So we play him for 6 mana, and we run in with the Divine Shield, and that thing dies. Now, against some decks, I would actually attack with the Blood Imp here to deal some extra damage. However, not against a rogue, because rogues can, of course, then just dagger up and kill this. So let's go ahead and play Flame Imp. It deals 2 damage to me, but I don't really care. Notice this game is a pretty good demonstration of how this deck is supposed to work. Obviously, it doesn't always work like this, but there's a reason why this deck performed so well in tournaments. It's extremely good at having board control. This happens a lot when you play with the deck, is, you know, around the mid-game, the late game, you have a bunch of creatures on the field while your opponent has, like, all of her cards in her hand. She's going to spend all of her mana just to assassinate 1 creature. That's unfortunately not going to be good enough, because now I think we should have enough damage to kill. Got 4, 7, 10. We have 11 damage. And in case that wasn't enough, we also drew into Soulfire. Let's just use that to kill the opponent and give a well played, because we're polite. Alright, so we didn't even need our Legendary or that combo card. It was a really solid game, and that is a look at Curi's board control Warlock deck. Mad props to Curi, because this deck is quite awesome, and if you can make it, I'd highly recommend giving it a shot. You of course, if you're new to the game, you may need to you know, swap out the Legendaries for something if you don't have those yet, but I found that the deck works quite well even without those Legendaries in it. So basically, all the cards in this deck, you know, there are 3 legendaries, but most of the cards are actually legendaries. Most of the cards are commons. As far as rares go, there's just these 2 Knife Jugglers, this 1 Shadow Flame, the Defender of Argus, the Azure Drake, and the Argent Commanders. Now, rares are relatively cheap. They only cost 100 dust. So you can get those, and a lot of these rares, too, the Argent Commander, the Azure Drake, Defender of Argus, and the Knife Jugglers, pretty much every single rare, with 1 exception, the Shadow Flame, is like a really just kind of famous rare in Hearthstone. It's a rare card that gets used a lot. They're all neutral. They all appear in lots of different decks, so you'll definitely not regret crafting them, because you'll use them in other decks. It's a deck I highly recommend giving a shot if you give a chance. Alright, well, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and or subscribe. I appreciate your support. And we'll be back soon with some more games with Curi's board control deck. We'll see you then.